So, introductions. Wendy. Wendy has 20 years of digital marketing experience, including 10 years at global agencies, before founding specialist social media Socialites in 2010. Socialites is now active in 69 countries across the globe, very impressive, and was 11th last year on the New Zealand Deloitte Fast 50. Wendy was 2019 Australasian Social Media Marketer of the Year and is a current finalist for this year's NZEY Entrepreneur of the Year. Great caliber on the stage today. She's also currently an independent director of Rugby World Cup 2021, so any sports enthusiasts, hit her up afterwards, and also Te Korawai o Waiheke. Although Wendy has broad experience in each of the roles we're going to represent here today, she'll be wearing the hat of CMO for our discussion. So as Justin said, it's a dress-up time. So marketing is all about events, right?
Oh yeah.
Events and parties and fun stuff. So you get the party beads.
Party
I'm sorry,
beads.
they're all a bit
No,
munted.
I can make the party beads work. Isn't it amazing?
Okay, so you will all know party beads equals marketing. Right, moving on, Fraser, so I'm skipping Karen, but Fraser is an experienced senior leader in general management, sales and marketing. Fraser is currently the CEO, guess you're going to be playing CEO today, of Plan B. He has a long career in senior roles and has earned his stripes working for organisations like Sony, Microsoft, where he was COO and CMO for 7 years, so also a marketing hat. He enjoys being the challenger and asking difficult questions, so looking forward to some of those today. And especially given his extensive marketing background, I'm sure you'll find his contribution useful. Fraser holds an MBA and is recognised as a transformative leader who delivers results. And as I'm told, doesn't like to sit still. He has acted as change agent and culture champion in transforming business models, sales processes, marketing functions, and the recruitment and development of people. So, Fraser, as a CEO, gets to wear, oh no, where'd it go? Money, it's all about the money, revenue. All right, so, sorry. Oh, damn. Thank you. Sorry, that's awful. Yeah, so money medallion equals CEO. All right, and last but by no means least, I'd like to welcome Karen Rolliston, who's wearing the governance hat today. Karen is a seasoned business leader with over 2 decades of experience in executive and senior management positions. Her goal-oriented approach and hands-on expertise has enabled her to build 3 successful businesses across Australia and New Zealand, transform a number of businesses into commercial successes, and holds a number of executive positions in tech and education. Not overwhelmed at all by who I'm sitting next to today. She holds an MBA, is a syndicate chair of the CEO Institute, holds positions on the boards of 3 New Zealand companies, and was part of the 3P Learning Leadership team during one of the biggest tech IPOs in Australia. So, governance, what do you think I've got? Yes. A policeman's hat.
Oh my God, it's so cute.
It's so cute, I know. All right.
That's what I've always wanted.
So as Justin said, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at it. Okay, great, thank you. So today our discussion hinges around the seemingly Mars and Venus divide of metrics, the metrics that really matter to these people, maybe not the CMO so much, but to the CEO and to the board. And as you saw, very few of us actually get to stand in front of a board and talk about metrics that matter. And they're not necessarily aligned with what we're measuring as marketers. So questions I had were, what metrics does a CEO have to front up to as, to the board? How does marketing contribute to that? And does an MQL mean anything to a board member at all? I don't know. And how do we ensure alignment? Who's even responsible for driving that? So all questions that today our panelists will get to. So first up, I'd like each of you to introduce the function you represent today, articulate the metrics your role measures marketing by, and why you care about that. So Wendy, let's start with you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me today. And I was just saying before, I think this is the first time I've actually spoken in front of real life people for a year, and it's so exciting. So thank you very much, and apologies if I talk too fast. I'm wearing boots instead of slippers, it's a step up. And the other big favour I was going to ask everybody is my company's just managed to hire a new Director of Performance Marketing. They've been in the country 2 days, so I brought Nick along. Hi, Nick. Could you just stand up and could everyone give him a warm Kiwi welcome? He's from Australia. So Performance Director Marketing knows everything's running like 7, 8 figure budgets over in Australia, around the world. So anything I don't know in detail, go see him afterwards. Kind of handy too.
Yeah, great.
Right, so the question was, what metrics are important to me with my CMO hat on? Yeah, I'll try to be quick, but it's an interesting one. So when I think of like governance, that's kind of making sure we do everything properly. I think of a CEO, your job is to like lead and set the direction of the company. But marketing, obviously my favorite, like we're the engine, right? Like we are actually the ones in the trenches doing the doing. So what I need to know as the CMO is what are the metrics that can actually help me make decisions about where I'm going to be putting my money, what should I be focusing on, what actions can I be doing? So I'm looking for really actionable metrics. So how I usually get those, and it really is unfortunately different business to business, but you tend to have with every business a few metrics that can tell the health of your business, how it's going. So if you're a grocery chain, it's size of the shopping basket, it's frequency of shop. If you're a SaaS company, it's your cost per acquisition, your MMR. If it's a agency, like a social media agency, for example, we're looking at revenue per employee. Like those are the metrics that matter to us from a marketing point of view. And they've got to be directly linked to business objectives, and they have to be something we can like actually put action on. Like reach, I don't care. Not interested at all about reach. What can I do with reach? So what, I reached a whole lot of people. Can I do anything with it? Nothing. I need to know the story behind it. That's me succinctly.
And so moving up the chain, as a CEO, what about you, Fraser? What do you measure marketing by? What matters to you?
Kia ora everybody, kia ora tātou. And awesome to see, again, the celebration of humans.
Yay for humans!
And a lot of familiar faces around the place too, and a lot of very, very experienced marketers here as well, so great to see that. Yeah, I think one of the key points is actually context, which Wendy touched on, because depending on the organisation you're in, what's going to matter is going to be very, very different. And depending on the type of the founding of the organisation as well, if you've got a strong engineering-led background organisation, marketing is going to have a very, very different seat at the table versus an entrepreneurial SaaS-based business. Exactly. So I think that's really relevant. And for me, the majority owner of the business I represent is a private equity organisation. So ROI is kind of all that the world view. Everything filters back through that, but they know enough to not get too deep into that from a pure metrics perspective. But for us, because we're a managed service provider, it's all about the care we give to customers. So it's actually the engagement is something I care a lot about. Is satisfaction, which is a kind of NPS is very passe, but actually still quite a relevant and customer effort score. Those are more the metrics that we're using on a daily basis, as well as obviously driving marketing to generate leads.
Yeah, that's interesting you say NPS, because we had a little debate about that earlier, about whether or not it was a thing. So good to have that endorsed.
And what was the outcome of that one?
What did everyone think?
It was?
It's a thing for me.
It was a split room, right? I think it was a bit of a split room. Yeah. Okay, Karen, from a board's perspective, what marketing metrics do you care about? What do you measure marketing by?
Well, I think just to start with, I was a bit concerned I'd walked into the wrong room. I mean, here I was hearing a conversation about consent, and I thought, oh my goodness.
Oh, and I told her she was wearing like a costume, so that probably didn't help.
Yeah. You're like, hashtag me too. Tech week. Awkward.
So I'm glad it was about privacy consent. Look, from a board's perspective, I think it's the first thing you need to remember is what is the role of the board. And the board is focused on three things really. And the first one is strategy, the second one is risk, and probably the next one is, well, compliance, and then we care about revenue. So when you're talking to a board, it's not the metrics. They mean absolutely nothing to us, because you will have a mix of people that don't understand marketing. You may have some people on the board that does, but it's not our role to dig down into those numbers. But what we need from you is the story. What do those numbers tell us? What are the insights that those numbers mean? Because you can put a number on a piece of paper, but unless you've got that context of where it comes from, what it means. So we're looking for what you're doing. How is that enabling our strategy? How does that help with the execution? Are we on track with revenue? Are you producing enough leads so that we're going to hit our revenue targets? From the risk perspective, we want to know, is there any risk somewhere? So are we likely to have a privacy breach? Are we doing something unethical? We really want to know that. Also, you know, potential brand reputation issues. So anything building a story around that. And we also want to know about changes in customer behaviour, because that feeds back into the strategy. So insights, because board members aren't day-to-day in the business, they may not have that insight that you do about the market. So any storytelling you can tell around how that's changing, what we should be doing next, feeding that back in, those are the sorts of things we want to hear. We want the insights, we want the story.
So I guess that answers our question as to whether or not an MQL matters to the board. That'd be no. And also aligns to what Amanda was saying earlier about revenue being a core focus for both sales and marketing. So that's interesting. Fraser, where do you think marketers get it wrong when measuring the contribution of marketing activity?
Imagine this is a hot button topic across the group. I think sometimes trying to explain the art versus the science as well, because I know, because I've been a marketer myself, is trying to justify every dollar that's spent and trying to tie it back to something else as a successful outcome can just be an absolute bloody, you know, pin the tail on the donkey when you're blindfolded in the dark after 18 tequilas. It's not going to get the outcome that you want. So I think actually it's often actually about measuring the small things. So for me, an event can be successful by how many people of a target list you got around the table, virtual, physical, or otherwise. Those sorts of things can actually be really telling on the story that Karen was talking about before. What is it you're trying to achieve over time, and sort of bite those off. I think trying to educate a CEO or a board for that matter about the complexities of marketing and the latest and greatest metrics that matter are really lost.
Goes back to the whole cake baking thing, right? We talked about earlier. What about from your perspective, Wendy? Where do you think marketers get it wrong?
Well, from a marketing point of view, I actually take a different view, which is I think a lot of marketers forget that it's like a sale is not the end. I kind of like use the example still, like especially in tech companies, like once you've got a sale, that's like the wedding, and then you've still got the marriage to go. So you've got to like really look after this person. So it's kind of that whole, and that's where you can get caught up in like cost per acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. But then if your churn rate's going nuts, like, I kind of bring it back. So I think it's, and especially like even when I was 20 odd years ago when I was at university here, and we're learning all about, you know, marketing funnels and things like that. And there's like, no one does marketing funnels anymore. It's all like a flywheel because it's a full-on, because it's a relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where still a lot of marketers do, you know, they get so focused on sale, sale, sale. And I'm like, yeah, but like that's the wedding and it's pretty. But, you know, once you're getting those kids in the 3 a.m. in the morning feeds, it's quite different. So how to make sure you've got that relationship to get through that first little stage.
Great lesson. Bin the funnel, engage a flywheel. Mark will know exactly all about the old flywheel. Hey, Mark at Amber
Love a good flywheel.
Yeah. Karen, the perception of marketing for some senior executives is that we're the colouring in department or the party department, adding minimal value beyond a press release or webinar event. So from your perspective, where do you see marketing's value and how should we prove it?
Look, marketing's key to any organisation. I mean, you're the ones that let the world know we're here. So, you know, there is huge benefit in that. But where it gets lost is in language. Now, you're the supposedly the team that learns how to communicate to your audience. So it's actually no difference when you talk to the board. So you need to use that board language. And if you can get that board language right, then your board will back you all the way. But when you start just throwing numbers out there and metrics and this, and you talk at that tactical level, it either thinks that the board won't relate to that and can't see the value. So change the language, talk about strategy. What does it mean? Is this going to enable our strategy? If we don't do this, is it going to disrail our strategy? That is where the value is, and that's where I quite often find marketers aren't talking about. They'll come in and go, hey, look, we've had all these hits to our website, and it's like, well, big deal, you know. So
But we
Tell the
care
stories.
about that.
Yeah, just thinking through metrics as I was just listening to that as well. The main thing I'm looking at when I'm talking to the board and representing the business, so it's the things that I care about, right? It's a balanced scorecard. And if you actually look at the majority of those metrics, they're laggards. They're telling us what's happened. Marketing is one of the few sort of divisions or functions of the business that's actually forward-looking. And that whole engagement, that you're thinking about your flywheel as well, and what's coming around again
What's
as well,
next?
and what's next. So I think that's more and more what we're starting to lean into at a metrics perspective that matter.
Yeah, I can just add a little bit there. I think a big role for a marketer talking to the board is like what you said, like that future. And it's not just, like, to be honest, it's not just the next quarter or the next Christmas campaign or whatever it is, but it's actually like, for example, we're taking our clients all through like Web3, the metaverse, what's that going to mean for your business, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of that real leadership. Hey, look, what does cryptocurrency mean, et cetera, et cetera. That, I think personally, is the job of the marketing department, because our job is, one, it's to have parties and have fun, but also online, have parties and have fun. But we've got to actually, our job is to educate and to take people into what is next, because the board and the CEO need to be, their job with the money is to plan the budget. So we need to you need to think about this and this, because you're busy doing that.
Yeah, great. And sticking with you just for a minute, thinking about all those massive changes in the industry, like the metaverse and all those great things that come with it, what's changed in relation to the metrics that really matter in the last couple of years?
Probably the biggest change that I've seen in the last couple of years is people who actually really embrace the kind of like lifetime value of a customer, which used to be a real tech thing, and I know we're in a room full of tech people, but it's kind of gone wider now, which I really think is quite important. And the other one that I've seen come through, and we've actually all talked about today, is the value of insights. And like as an example, I know our team back in the office, community management team, they're just sitting there all day getting insights off social channels. And they put together reports, and in times of crisis, those little reports of what is everyone actually saying goes directly to the board 3 o'clock every day. And they make business decisions based on that. And it's like amazing. So that's marketing department to board, nothing in between. Just, and they'll go, yep, we've had people like up staff wages based on that kind of thing. That big decision.
Cutting your lunch, Fraser. Stink.
No. Well, they told us to do it, so it's kind of a direct road. Still involved. Come to the circle.
Yep. And Fraser, as a CEO, what are the metrics your board measures you by? And how much should the marketing function care about that? And how does their role contribute?
Everyone should care about their boss, shouldn't they?
But what if you're not our boss and we've got another boss? Like general marketing, like how does our role as a marketer contribute?
I think I touched a little bit on that. So the metrics. Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Oh, sorry. I know there was like 3 questions in one.
I'm struggling with that. I told you about the attention span.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Okay. Feel free to get up and down and move whenever you like. Yeah. What are the metrics your board measures you by? Right. And how much should we care as marketers? And how do we even contribute to that?
So, well, the first part of the question is it goes to what Karen was saying before about what's the board worrying about risk and revenue and strategy. So you can sort of imagine the metrics that are related to certainly the revenue part of it. And as I said before, it's a balanced scorecard. So I'm looking at everything to do with our internal metrics around product and sales and revenue and pipeline. I'm also looking at all my team, what's our health, what's our staff retention, what's our employee net promoter score, and then everything to do with the customer as well. So it's really in that customer space, I'd say, although internal marketing is marketing, right? It's telling the story to everybody, taking everybody on the journey. Should marketing care about what I am pushing up the line? In a way, no. It's my job to set the tone for the organisation that we're all driving around. And there will be parts that are functionally focused. Engineering will have a different set of requirements to marketing. But at the initial reaction to that one, no, I don't think there's outside of the overall specific stuff that we cascade down.
Okay. I kind of go immediately to, of course.
Yeah. That's the point.
Because I was sort of thinking, like, I would, as a CMO, go, okay, what's the business objectives? And then I almost like create my marketing objectives off the back of that and make sure they're super linked. So that when I'm talking that, I'm like, yeah, and that directly links into that one.
No, sorry, probably nuance how I answered. I was talking about what I'm reporting up to the board.
Oh, yes.
I'm saying what I'm saying out to the organisation, which is totally set with the business. 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
100%, yeah.
So a balanced scorecard, how many people know what that is? Okay, maybe you could just, and there's a lot of like different jargon with senior execs sitting on a panel versus
And
marketers.
marketing people.
So could you just give like a little 2-minute, what is a balanced scorecard?
Sure, and it's my my understanding of it, and it's probably a few years old in its approach as well. But it's a simple way of having a high level bunch of metrics that talk to the overall health of the business, not just around the revenue things that matter. So yes, revenue's on there, profit is on there. There could be product incubation results on there, but there's also a lot to do with the 360 view. How are things internally inside the organisation? What's the cultural health, employee health, retention, etc. Could be diversity, could be velocity of hire, and then flicking that whole leads around into the community and saying, if we're in a community engagement organisation, or it's really just looking at customer, what are all the things that we measure inside that? So it's more of a 360 view of the organisation.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that context. So Wendy, thrown to you now. As marketing becomes a more powerful channel for building a company's brand, promoting collaboration across the organisation and gathering customer insights, which we've talked about, how should marketing be positioned in the eyes of the board? And does a CEO really have everything they need to represent the marketing function?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been noticing just in the kind of board level as well, how many marketing background people are becoming CEs. Like there's a lot more of them. And I think being a marketer gives you an exceptionally good, strong, I suppose, width and depth of skills to really work your way up to being a CE if you want to do that. So it's a really interesting space. Like even, like the new CE of Westpac, like her background's marketing. I think you've got to have that strong relationship really. But I think they should. But it's just a conversation. Like I still get frustrated, as I say, if I get people coming to me and going, oh my goodness, we reached this many million people. I'm like, that means nothing to me. Stop it. But then back in my day, it was all like TV tarps and stuff like this. So like the world is changing. I still don't, and I didn't understand what tarps were really back 20 years ago, and I still don't really understand.
No idea.
No, just like I don't have to do it. But that's like, look, these tarps are amazing. I'm like, I just don't. Who cares? So I think, getting those insights, making sure it makes sense. And just doing that spot check, like, can I explain this to my mum, is always a really good test. Try that one.
Yeah.
I actually think there's real benefit, and it depends on your board and your CE, but actually having deep dives every now and again with your board members on marketing, on what you're doing at that strategic level, is actually really valuable. You've got to remember though that it is an education piece as well, and sometimes you need to educate your board members. I have sat on boards before where boards will put off a decision just simply because the executive team haven't been able to articulate enough as to actually what is it they want, that's probably wrong. We know what they want, but they haven't been able to articulate the strategic reason or the benefit of doing so. So things, I know at a management level people get frustrated, the board didn't sign that off, and it just keeps going on and on and on, and that'll be because you haven't been able to build that case around strategy and why it's so important.
So does that mean Fraser's done a shit job of actually telling our story? So this is actually a question for you, Fraser, not specifically pointing at you, but how much airtime do you actually give marketing at a board meeting?
Oh, the two questions is, if that happens, yes, the chief executive's done a shit job of explaining or getting the story corralled together, and we've been there. Not necessarily a huge amount, because it's at the minute inside my organisation is actually something I'm doing. So it's one of those curses of being a marketer that's a CEO, is that you're never getting enough time to do anything properly, but you're held accountable for everything, and that's just how life goes. But
you just love it too much, don't you?
Yeah, totally.
You don't want to give it away.
Can't let it go. One of the blessings I do have, could be a curse, is one of the directors is an ex-marketer herself. So that's super helpful, and I'm meeting her on Monday to review the plan. So that's keeping the board engaged at that level as well. So that'll be the deep dive that you're talking to, but at an individual coaching level, perhaps more than.
I think you've got to watch out for people with a bit of a marketing background, because I have a bit of a marketing background, not that I've done it for years and years and years, but the couple of conversations that we've had here, it's not funnels anymore, we don't do personas, it's like, well, that's what I did.
Yes. That was hilarious. So we're having this conversation just before, and I was going, I can't stand personas, they're so annoying. And I just really think they're old-fashioned and 10 years ago. And but then I was like, but they're really useful. This is where they are useful. And reason, there is a context to why I don't think personas really work. I personally think that you should let people decide whether they're your customer rather than you deciding that they're their customer. I'm just very, and I think nowadays with the tech you can do that. So it's kind of lazy marketing, but they're fantastic if you're talking to non-marketers who traditionally, and remember I grew up like trying to teach people about Facebook to stereotype people that had never been on Facebook on their lives and like going, I think we should do this. I'm a $1 billion business person. We should definitely put all this money into Facebook, and you're trying to explain, and it was just impossible. But then if you say, hey, imagine you are a 25-year-old woman who has got a kid and lives in Auckland, then they'd go, oh yes, I can understand what you're doing. So it's that storytelling. So I do think personas are really awesome to explain to non-marketing people why you're wanting to do something. But generally as a marketer, I hate them, just to be controversial.
That's a whole other rabbit hole.
No, do we all hate personas? Yeah.
No,
No.
split room.
Split rooms are great.
Who knows?
Okay, so often for marketers who do get to present at board meetings, it can be really nerve-wracking. So Karen, what advice would you give to the marketers here today in preparing for that, assuming that the CEO wants to bring you in for a deep dive?
I think the first thing is to remember we're all people and we all have different amounts of knowledge and we can learn from you as anything. But I'm a great believer, if you're unsure about something, pick up the phone and talk to the chair of the board and have a conversation around what is it do you want, how do you want this information presented, because then you don't waste anyone's time. And actually, more often than not, the chair of the board is actually more than happy to have that conversation with you, and then the meeting's valuable rather than missing the mark and everyone goes away disappointed. So that would be my advice.
Great.
100%.
And then based on that, Wendy, what are some of the hurdles you see in communicating up the chain from a marketer's perspective?
I suppose it's just actually getting that time with them, really. If they aren't, a little bit like we've talked about before, if they're not a marketer, you're trying to go, this is important. So that's where you can use your personas, which is kind of handy, do your storytelling. But I've never found it too hard. It's just making sure they understand how important it is in the bigger story of the organisation, and that you're not just the party department. You actually do the work.
All about weaving the story around the metrics that you're managing and measuring, but not necessarily exposing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to throw it to the room. We've got 3 powerhouse individuals. Whoa, hands going everywhere. Bob Pinchin.
Hey, Caroline. I've got a question for the wizened old CEO on the end of the panel there.
Hello, Bob.
Hey, Fraser. We've heard a lot today, and obviously over the last few years around marketing technology stacks, et cetera. Can you give any advice to, there's a lot of marketers here who, in the old days, they would have been going to their boss, their CEO, saying, look, can I have another 20 grand to spend in one of those wonderful publications like Computer World or something like that? These days, they come into you with a question which is more related to actually, I guess, what used to be the domain of CIOs and IT managers, which is actually more about buying the technology. So can you give any advice, obviously you've been on both sides of the fence, but any advice to how marketers should approach their CEO and say, hey, look, we need to buy this technology because ultimately we'll retain customers, we'll generate new customers. It's a less, in a lot of ways, a different sell to the CEO. So just wonder if you could provide any advice.
Yeah, good to see you, mate. I think, so if I hark back to my previous life, I was at Microsoft for 7 years, CMO and COO and a bunch of different jobs. During that time, the company moved from being a software company to a cloud services organization. And the behavior that we saw at the time was exactly what Bob was saying, is that the IT spend aside an organization, which was the realm of the CIO 100%. I think by the time I left, they had about control of 30 to 40%. And I think at the time, marketing was getting something like 40% of the IT spend. I don't know if I'm making that number up. I'm looking at my learned colleagues, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. So I would actually say there's plenty of evidence out there in the marketplace that talks to the power of the CMO inside of organizational spends on technology. And if we're talking about, I'm imagining Karen will have an opinion if you're talking about the risk level with privacy, etc. There's a lot of tooling, etc., that you actually need to invest in to actually protect how you go to market and how you engage in conversations. So my first thing would be the data's out there. There's heaps of it, and just use that as a demonstration point as to why the company needs to invest in that space. That's where I'd start. I don't know if there's any other.
Yeah, it's basically building a business case for it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. Like it's now you say that it's huge in terms of, and I think of all our clients and how much, like, you know, whether they were on Salesforce or whatever it is, like it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And like even my company, which isn't like that huge, you know, we spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on marketing, tech support to run our company, and it's just fascinating. Like it really has become such an important part of what we all do.
Yeah.
Whereas, and you have to be techie to understand that. You need to understand the Me Too privacy stuff. You need to understand all this. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really exciting time to be a marketer, I think.
But I'd also say, and I look at Tim and a few other people might have an opinion about this as well, is actually work with IT on that journey as well. Because if you go head to head, that's not organisationally great. But also the security and controls that IT needs to run in conjunction is pretty important as well.
You have to make friends with IT.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's so many different tech stacks now, right? So I think we've taken an action to create a resource that outlines all the different tech stacks available for marketing.
Maybe a discount for everyone would be amazing.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't it? Any other questions?
Again, what are some of the skills that you need to possess or to have to be a good CMO or CEO or director? And what are the key things that you need to have?
Maybe that's one each.
Yeah, I think across anything you need to be a great communicator, whether you're a director or a governor or governor. Sorry, a governor, a CEO, or a CMO. I think the soft human skills are just, especially post-pandemic. I think we've seen quite a beautiful movement actually of people really appreciating those nowadays, and I think we've just as a humankind got a lot more empathetic and gentler, and we've seen the kids and the dogs in the background, and there's been quite a change. And you don't have to have a professional self and a personal self. It's very integrated nowadays, which is quite beautiful. So you need to, like, empathy, the soft skills are just going to be absolutely everything, because at the end of the day, we'll probably have AI doing the rest of our jobs. So in 5 years, so just keep working on the soft skills.
Karen, what do you think?
I'd actually say, that goes sort of, the soft skills, and you've got to have some sort of, technical skill, whatever your background is. But actually for me, it's about being curious, because the world is changing so fast. I mean, you just think how fast all your jobs have changed in the last
6
few
months.
years, 6 months. If you're not prepared to continually, look out on the broader horizon, continually learn, continually read, continually grow, then you're actually going to be of no value to anyone at any role, at any level. So for me, that's the most important thing.
And
Love that.
Karen, that was my one. That was my line. Curiosity. So then let me jump to, and I 100% agree with both those points. The other one I jump to is diversity in your role. So yes, you can go through your career in a linear trajectory, and it's absolutely possible to do it. It's getting harder. I would say what's helped me is that I've moved like this, and I've moved sideways in my career, and I've got different experiences, and I've done everything but HR and finance. I'd say I've done everything but those two roles, and I've touched and broken lots of different things, but I think that diversity helps grow you as an individual and as a contributor to business too.
Great, thank you. So in parting, what's the one piece of advice in less than a minute you would give to the room from the hat, beads, chains you're wearing in the metrics that matter?
So as a marketer, be always looking for those insights that you can feed up to make a difference. Actionable insights.
Perfect. Karen?
Tell us the story.
And be futuristic in your thinking.
Great.
Nailed it.
I'm sure you all agree we saved the best till last, so please join me in thanking the panel.